Hey everyone, welcome back to 'Cause We're Nerds, the show where we talk about comics and movies and video games and anime. I'm your host Caleb, and with me is my wife Courtney.
Hello everyone.
How you doing this fine, wonderful day?
Oh, just lovely.
Okay, so here's the deal, everyone. We were going to talk about Rogue One today, and then we ran into a couple of life problems. Snafus. So, we are going to do a quick, short episode on Jedi Fallen Order, which we talked about briefly, I think last week, during the What You've Been Up To. So, I've been playing this. Courtney has been watching me for most of it.
Yeah.
And we're just going to kind of give our general thoughts and feelings. There will probably be some, light spoilers, nothing major. Honestly, I'm not that far enough into the game for there to be really any major spoilers at this point anyway, except for, the initial setup. So, we'll just get into it. My first impressions, Courtney, is I think it's a pretty great game. It's kind of a cross between games like Dark Souls, where you have this combat that's kind of very thoughtful. You can't just run in and start slashing things, or else you're going to die.
Okay.
So you've got that. You've got a bit of Uncharted. Well, you got a lot of Uncharted.
I definitely get an Uncharted vibe when I watch you play.
Yeah,
but it's not as good as Uncharted.
With all the climbing. It doesn't have the cinematic stuff that Uncharted has. But the climbing is definitely a big part of it. And then there's a little bit of a Mass Effect, which I don't think you ever have. Oh, you have? Okay. Oh, yeah. I played that. You watched that.
Back in the day. Apartment life.
It's a little bit of Mass Effect in that you have some different planets you can go to. It's definitely not as expansive as Mass Effect. Mass Effect has 20 planets or something. This one doesn't have as many, and it also only opens up one or two at a time, but you can choose which one you want to go to, and once you get there, the levels are pretty massive. Really big. You'll finish the story section, and then you could go off and explore the amount of time it took you to do the story section, and stuff that's completely unrelated, which is pretty cool. So, that would be my general description of it. You have anything to add?
No, it seems very accurate. I have been thinking Uncharted for a while now. I compared it a little to Breath of the Wild with the shrines that you have to do, some of the puzzle pieces. Having to work through some of the puzzles in the game kind of reminded me of that. Yeah,
there are some puzzles. I don't think there's a ton.
Yeah, I felt like there was a little bit more in the beginning, but what you've been doing the past few hours today, I haven't really noticed as much.
Yeah, it seems like those puzzles are mostly relegated to the Jedi temples. So you end up going...
Like a shrine?
Like a shrine. you end up going to these different Jedi temples or shrines, and to get around in those, it seems like there are more puzzles. Mm-hmm. But those are kind of hidden within each world itself. So getting to those in the first place is kind of a thing. And then once you're in it, there's all kinds of stuff to do. So, yeah, not wrong about that. Let's see. It's kind of funny. We started watching Rogue One last night for today's episode.
Yes, that I was not going to be on.
And I got kind of confused. I kind of confused myself because here's the deal. We've been watching The Mandalorian, which takes place after episode 6. I've been playing Jedi Fallen Order, which takes place after episode 3. And then we were watching Rogue One, which takes place before episode 4. And I was getting all kinds of wires crossed because of the different timelines. Then you've got The Rise of Skywalker, which comes out in less than a month at this point.
Yep.
Which obviously is a whole other timeline. So keeping all the stormtroopers straight, especially all the different kinds, because they've introduced a whole lot of new ones in Jedi Fallen Order. They introduced a whole lot of new ones in Rogue One. And there's other new stuff in The Mandalorian, I have gotten very confused. Have you had that problem?
I did a little earlier today. I had to ask. I can't remember if it was for Rogue One or for the game, but I specifically asked you what timeline we were in because I was a little confused about where things were falling. I think because we saw something and I'm like, wait a minute, that shouldn't have happened. Oh wait, it's because we saw Saul in the video game and we had just seen him in Rogue One.
Rogue One, yep.
Yeah.
Saul Guerrero does make an appearance. That was in one of the trailers or one of the E3 things that they showed a while back. I'd actually forgotten about it.
He seems a lot younger in the game, though.
He is, because Rogue One takes place like right before Episode 4.
Okay.
And then this game, I think, is maybe 5 years after Episode 3.
Okay.
So there's a good, 10 to 15 year gap.
Okay, I was wondering, I was like, because when I saw him, I was really confused, because I knew that they were supposed to be close in timeline, but his character was not aged properly, so I was a little unsure of where it fell.
Yeah, and there's another tell in there, in that in Rogue One, when you meet him later on in the film, he's got a whole bunch of hair, but any of the scenes with him and Jyn early on, he's bald, and he's got that kind of look in the game.
Right.
So that kind of clues you in as well.
Right.
What else can I say about this game? This game is, it's a lot of fun. I think it is challenging. I don't typically play games that are really difficult. Whenever I play a game, I play it on the normal difficulty.
Yeah.
And so
you're not like Corey.
I'm not like your brother who plays everything on the hardest difficulty. I do not know why.
It's a challenge.
It is a challenge. It's a test of your sanity. And I went in and died a lot. And continue to die a lot. But
yeah. And the worst part is the loading screens after you die.
Yeah, so if you jump off a cliff or something, the game will automatically put you back where you were, instantly.
Yes.
But if you
die
and
you have to be respawned.
Yeah, so if your health reaches 0. So if you jump off a cliff, you lose a little bit of health. But it puts you back. If your health gets all the way down to 0, either by jumping off or by an enemy, you have to respawn. And it does take a while for it to load in. I think it's worse on... It's not the tutorial level, but it's the first real level you go to. It's worse there, I think, because of the terrain. And it does kind of suck because I think it's a game where you're meant to die a lot. It's like Dark Souls, where they know you're going to die. So I wish those loading times were a lot faster.
Coming from someone who, I'm not a really big video gamer at all. I would like to be. I would like to be in video games more. I just struggle. But I do avidly watch you play video games. And I have not enjoyed this one as much as I thought I would. Some of the things would be the loading screens really take you out of what's happening. Once we counted it, it was 50 seconds.
Yeah, it was about a minute.
And it was, that's really long time to have to wait for your scene to load to play.
Yeah, if it, there are other games I mentioned earlier today, Final Fantasy 15 had really long loading times too. I think longer than this game. But the difference with that one is you didn't see those loading screens that often.
Because you didn't die as much.
And in this game, where you do die a lot, it feels like it could be too much. I'm doing fine with it, but you are right. It is quite a bit longer than I would like.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't really understand why it's so instant when you jump off a cliff.
That's why I feel like the game is incomplete.
Well,
I mentioned that earlier. I just feel like it's not a fully prepared game that should have been released. It still needed more time.
Well, I say I don't understand, but being a programmer, I do understand. I think there are better ways they could have done it. But one thing that you're hinting on is, or hitting on rather, there definitely are some bugs in the game. Almost all of them are graphical stuff. So you'll see textures pop in all the time.
Yeah.
Like, that's the biggest glaring thing, is you'll go into an area and the textures will be really low res, blurry, then all of a sudden all the details will pop in. That happens a lot. Even in some of the cutscenes, that happens. That's the biggest thing. I did have an issue earlier today where I died, respawned, ran up a flight of stairs, and I guess I was too fast for the game. The game hadn't fully loaded, so the enemies that should have been at the top didn't spawn, and I was able to just continue going on. Mm-hmm. I realized, wait a minute, we're supposed to be people here, and I turned around and went back, and then they spawned. So there's some weird thing where even though it loads, it hasn't set up all the triggers, because I'm assuming it says when you enter this area, add the enemies. And it didn't do that, which, I mean, that's not game breaking, and it was only for a small area. The only time I've really had any actual issues is early on in that first level that had the long load times. The game did crash on me once.
Yeah, you got an error code, which that was another thing that I was kind of like, made me a little less impressed with the game.
I mean, it's not the first game I've had that crashed. Games do crash every once in a while. But it was surprising to see that crash there. I did end up going back to the same place, pretty much doing the same thing, and it did not crash. So I don't know what caused it, but that was kind of a bummer.
I do think it is really hard because the last game you played was Breath of the Wild, and I mean, it is breathtaking. And though it has like some glitches, like sometimes it takes a little while for the area to load as you're like coming in, or it like lags just a tiny bit, you don't see some of the imperfections that this game has.
Yeah, that's true. I think
like this, to me, I feel like this was like, oh, this is going to be moneymaker. Let's rush it out. Like it just...
Oh, no. This was not rushed out.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I haven't spent time researching it or anything, but just because, I don't know, there's some things in it.
And as like, since you're not a gamer, like texture popping, that's not an uncommon thing.
Right. I mean, you can see it in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't think it's as intense.
Well, I think one thing that Breath of the Wild has over this in terms of that is Breath of the Wild is not as detailed. So when you have those textures pop in, the difference isn't so drastic that you have like here where everything is hyper detailed, trying to be as realistic as possible, and the textures pop in later.
Gotcha.
You know, stuff like that. However, I will say I think the pacing of the game is pretty good so far. As you go through the game, it's kind of like a Metroidvania as well. A game where you can go back later. So you gain powers as you go through the game. And you can go back to other areas that you've already been later and get to areas that you couldn't previously. And so as you're going through the game, you start unlocking things. When you start the game, you only have one force power, which is slow down. And throughout the game, I know that you can unlock force push, which I currently have, force pull. I don't know if there are any other force powers you can get.
So I noticed you have like the skill tree thing, and you get to kind of choose the path you want to take.
So the skill tree just enhances the skills you have.
Okay.
It'll give you new attacks, but it doesn't give you new force powers.
Okay.
As you get force powers, it unlocks more parts of the tree that you can upgrade. But that the pacing of when you get those new powers, I feel is really nice. Like it's spread out. There are a lot of collectible stuff that you can find. Pretty much all of them are just cosmetic though. You collect
for your saber.
Yeah, so you collect pieces for your lightsaber. You can collect different designs for your poncho, which I don't know why. That poncho looks gross. You can collect new paint jobs for your ship and your droid.
Which I feel like Star Wars is incomplete if you don't have a droid.
What? Right. And you do have a droid.
You have to have a droid.
Yeah, you do have a droid. I think his name is BD-1. He's a nice little droid.
Yeah, he's cute.
He's kind of like...
He reminds me of Groot. The way he rides on you.
I was going to say like a rabbit. The way he hops around.
I mean, yeah. But like the way he'll ride up on your shoulder or on your back. He's kind of there to just like help you out.
Yeah. So yeah.
He doesn't roll.
I will say, when you first unlock the stuff that lets you customize your lightsaber, you can see all of the slots that you will eventually have stuff for. Mm-hmm. So you'll see like how many different pieces you have for each part of the lightsaber.
Right.
I was pretty disappointed at the lack of options, I guess, that you have for that. So like, I think you can change maybe 4 or 5 things. You can change the color of the blade, the emitter, the texture, the
material.
That's the texture.
Sorry.
You can change the button, the ignition.
Yeah.
You can change the grip. Maybe one other thing, but so like those 5 things. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them have maybe like 7 to 10 options.
Yeah.
Which sounds like a lot, but when you're looking at it, I mean, I expected the customization to be really deep. And the fact that it's not kind of disappointed me.
I'm sorry. I do think the customization thing is kind of cool, though. I think it would be better to have more options or, like, some way of, like, giving it more of an exact detail of what you're wanting, but I'm sure that would take a long time.
Yeah. Those are also paced out pretty well. Like, you'll find lightsaber parts very often. And that actually kind of surprised me. I feel like I'm going to run out of parts to find before the end of the game.
Yeah, I agree. You also find stations to fix it. Like a lot, I feel like.
Oh, yeah. To like upgrade things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also your droid also gets enhancements throughout the game.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. I actually got 2 different ones today. And they act the same way as your powers, where you can go back to areas and do things that you couldn't previously.
Okay.
So they're basically barriers to keep you from doing certain things before the game developers want you to. The voice acting, all pretty great. I haven't heard any bad acting. The graphics, aside from like some of the things we've talked about, it looks really nice.
Yeah.
It does follow the Dark Souls saving scheme where you have to go to like a little shrine area to save. I would prefer to be able to save wherever I wanted, but because my issue with save points is that usually they're too far apart, and like when you want to stop, it takes forever.
You have to wait until you find a new spot. Yep. I agree with that.
But I think this game actually has them about right. Like they're not super common, but at the same time, it's not incredibly hard to find one either.
Yeah.
Unless you're in a level that's like a maze or something.
And you're stuck.
Yeah. Like I was earlier.
Yes.
It feels pretty good overall, which is nice.
Yeah.
One thing I will say about this game that I also kind of feel the same about The Mandalorian and a little bit about Rogue One is that it helps fill in the details.
Okay.
So like not Rogue One, The Mandalorian, you see a lot of things on the ground level that like, of course that would need to happen, or maybe it's been mentioned in movies, but you've never seen it before.
Right.
And we, I think, had a little bit of that too in Rogue One. Rogue One was a lot more of like connecting the pieces rather than this.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
But this one has a lot of stuff like that I hadn't anticipated it to have. Like I don't want to spoil the thing specifically, but you see areas of machines that you've seen in the past that you get to go inside that we've never been inside before, kind of like The Mandalorian. How they, well, I guess I shouldn't spoil that, but they go inside other things there as well.
Why can't we just say spoilers and you say it?
I mean, it's not a big deal. I don't want to spoil it for people.
Okay.
So that was a lot of fun.
How far caught up is the podcast on The Mandalorian? The
Mandalorian is 1 episode. We haven't talked about it since this last one because it came out Friday.
So I mean, like,
but by the time this episode comes out, two new ones will have come out.
Okay. I think I'm confused, but that's fine.
Yeah. So those things are good.
Yeah, it does fill in the world.
Yeah.
And kind of give you like a real world perspective, I guess.
Right. Which is cool.
An everyday kind of person.
Yeah, I mean the game opens in a shipyard where you see them literally building Star Destroyers, which is like really cool. I mean, how do these things get made? And it's, of course, when you're going through the level, that doesn't make any sense because it's all level design. But anyway.
Yes.
So all around good stuff. Excuse me. The facial animations could be a little bit better.
Yeah, there's a, there's some pieces to it, but, to each their own.
Yeah. Overall, though, I really enjoy it. You have anything else you want to say about it?
I don't really like the villain or people that you're attacking changing colors, but I mentioned that to you earlier.
Oh, yeah. So what she's talking about is when you're in combat with an enemy, if they are going to do a unblockable attack, they will kind of, not glow, but they'll get like this overlay red on them.
And then isn't there one where, like, if they're going to attack, they're orange? Did I imagine that color?
I think I did see an orange at one point, but I don't remember what that was for.
That one I didn't care for. I guess it's just kind of weird. I feel like if you're fighting, you're fighting.
Yeah. So the red overlay is really helpful from a gameplay mechanic.
I didn't know that's what that was for. I could see that being helpful, but I'm more was annoyed with it with the orange. I think it was to say, like, the creature had seen you and it's going to attack or something like that. Yeah,
I remember seeing that early on, but I haven't seen it since. I don't know if they patched that out.
Okay.
Or if maybe that was like
a tutorial type thing.
A tutorial thing, or maybe I could activate my force power on them or something. But it hasn't really come up since that one time.
Yeah. I will say, like, overall, being the person who's watching and not playing, it's an okay game. It's not as exciting or gripping, in my opinion, as Uncharted, which is probably one of my favorite games that I've watched you play. But I think it has the opportunity to get better. And I'm curious to see kind of like where it'll go and like where it'll fall in the timeline. Like how far it'll take you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I guess maybe I should mention the story real quick. I like the story, but the story is kind of paper thin. Like the beginning starts, you have the inciting incident, which is really awesome. And then you get to like your first real world, the one that's got the long loading screens. And you go through it and you get to the end and you find this thing. It kind of sets up what you need to do for the rest of the game.
Mm-hmm. You kind of have to choose which path you're going to go, right?
Yeah, but like the justification for why you're doing that, it doesn't really make sense. Like, it's basically, not to spoil anything, but basically it's like, all right, well, this guy did this and I'm trying to figure out what he did, so I need to go do all the things he did. So, like, that doesn't...
Is it his master?
No, it's not. But, like, that, to me, that doesn't really... That's not a great story.
Right.
Excuse me. That's not a great reason to go do these things. I feel like they probably could have come up with a slightly better reason. Mm-hmm. And it's not like that person is telling him where to go specifically. I mean, sometimes, but it's... I don't know. I feel like that part of the story could be better. Once you're past that and you're actually in it, I feel like the story is better. But I think it's a game that, at least for the most part, I'm not super far in. I'm maybe, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 hours at this point.
Yeah.
I think it's a game that's meant to be played, like experienced versus kind of letting a story unfold. Which
might be why, for someone who's, like, watching it, might not enjoy it as much.
Right.
What are your feelings on, like, the combat when, like, you're fighting with your lightsaber? I feel like there's, like, it doesn't flow the way it should.
I think that it took me a long time to get used to it, because I don't play very often these types of games where it's got this type of combat. But I've kind of got the handle on it now, where I feel like I can kind of just go in sometimes and start swinging because I figured out when I need to dodge, how I need to dodge, when I need to block. But at the same time, you can still die by the weakest enemies.
Oh, yeah.
If you're not careful. Like, I could still die by blaster bolts. And I have, because I've tried to block them and my timing has been off. And I die from a regular stormtrooper. At the same time, I could rush into this giant monster and kill it in, 6 attacks, which I have done, without getting hit, because I figured out the flow of the game. It doesn't look fluid.
Yeah.
But as you're playing, it feels a lot more fluid.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess the animations don't necessarily feel fluid when you're doing the different parts, like dodging into an attack, into a dodge.
Yeah, it's almost choppy looking at moments.
I could see that.
That was another thing that kind of was weird to me about it. And so I was just curious if it felt the same way when playing it.
Maybe early on, but once you get into it, definitely not. It actually feels really fluid as you're playing it. It feels really responsive.
Okay.
Which is good.
I'm surprised because from watching, I would not think that.
Yeah. I've played some games where as you're playing and as you're fighting, it's not responsive and it feels very, really sluggish. This game definitely doesn't have that.
Okay. Well, that's good.
One thing that this game does have that I want to mention is that as you're playing, when you beat an enemy or sometimes when you find things, you can scan them. And it adds it to your data bank. And it's kind of like an encyclopedia. So you can go into it and read about the creature or whatever you found.
Yeah.
So, for example, there are these rat things that pop up all over. And after you beat the first one, you can scan it and it'll give you a paragraph about that creature and how they live. And maybe what they eat. And different...
And how they might attack you and things like that. Helpful tips.
Exactly. Yeah, it's got kind of how they will attack you.
Like a field guide.
Yep. And how you need to defend against it, what the best strategies are, but also an in-universe, encyclopedia entry kind of thing.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And I found that really interesting. I've stopped and paused it and read almost all of those up until this point, which I know that some games like Dark Souls, again, do that as well. And it really helps fill out the world without the developers having to put a whole bunch of extra time into it.
Yeah.
So that was really nice. What have you thought of the ancient Jedi stuff that we've seen?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I have really an opinion on it. I've seen a few clips here and there of them I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't have a good answer for that.
No, that's fine.
One.
I personally really like it. The first time you go into one of those shrine things.
I did think the shrine was really cool.
Yeah.
And the puzzles you had to do. I really did enjoy watching that. I thought that part was really good.
Yeah. The designs of them are really nice.
Yeah.
The very first one you go into, there's this moment, and I didn't actually catch it till I was leaving. And it's the whole world kind of transforms around you without you realizing it. And when I left, I realized what was happening. I was like, wait, whoa. And it kind of blew my mind. I really enjoy that stuff. That's the kind of stuff that I felt the prequels kind of brought to the series, this grandiose history of the Jedi that the originals didn't really have. And it's kind of been expounded upon since. I mean, we had Knights of the Old Republic, which I think kind of brought that in, and some other games, but this one really seems to be diving into that hard.
Yeah.
And that's really cool.
I think that's partly because of the character and them kind of being one of the last ones.
Yeah. And
needing to fix that problem.
Definitely. Up until this point, I've only fought the main boss, or the protagonist, or the antagonist of the game once. The second sister. She is a Inquisitor. I guess she's cool. I haven't seen very much of her.
She's intense.
She is intense. I will say there's a whole new breed of stormtroopers in this game called Purge Troopers, which are troopers that I think accompany Inquisitors.
They're the ones that do the purge.
They do. They go around and try to finish up Order 66 and get rid of all of The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi. Interesting. Didn't do that on purpose. And all that stuff. So, they're cool. They're harder to fight, of course, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Not sure I have too much else to say about this game.
Yeah, I think I've said what I needed to say.
All right, well, we are going to call it here. This is a much shorter episode than we normally do, but for the holidays, for Thanksgiving, we thought that we would take it a little bit easy on us, especially since our initial plans fell through. But if all goes to plan, next week we should be talking about Star Wars The Force Awakens, and then the next week, The Last Jedi, all leading up to the Rise of Skywalker, the finale of the Skywalker series.
Yes.
The final trilogy in the trilogy of trilogies.
Yes. Yes.
Coming very much full circle. But until then, I would like to thank Taylor Poole for our opening intro music, as well as, not as well as, but also check out our friends over at the CNC Power Hour, where they stream Magic the Gathering and Twitch, and also, oh my goodness.
They stream Magic the Gathering on Twitch, as well as video games throughout the week. You should check them out. They're really great guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I normally plug them, so I don't know why you're talking.
I'm having all kinds of problems.
Sorry also for the quiet episode. We've been a little sick lately.
It's all good. Also, check out our website, causewe'renerds.com, to find all of our latest episodes. And until next week, stay nerdy.